If the Bible's got you tied in knots, if you're burdened with religious thoughts, come grab a drink and join the choir. It's Heretic Happy Hour.
Well, yes, it is the Heretic Happy Hour. It's that time again, boys and girls, and we are so excited to speak to you on the Heretic Happy Hour podcast. My name is Keith Giles. I am the author of Jesus Untangled, Crucifying Our Politics to Pledge Allegiance to the Lamb, and a few other books. And I am joined by my co-hosts, the amazing, the wonderful Matt and Jamal. Say howdy, guys.
Hi, I'm Matt Distefano, and I'm one of the co-hosts as well, author of the recently released Heretic. And I want to introduce the hotline that we have, 240-3-HERESY. That is 240-343-7379. And producer, do we have a voicemail?
Hey guys, this is Zach Parsons here, and a question I have for you is, like you guys, I too have deconstructed my views on hell. I no longer believe in like eternal conscious torment and all that, or a literal hell. But something I've deconstructed a bit in this last year is a literal heaven, like most primarily after death, like ideas of heaven. So I was curious what you guys think of after death ideas of heaven. For me, I just don't hold to it anymore. I don't know what I believe, but I don't believe in like a literal pearly gates, streets of gold, everything PG kind of heaven. So I'm just curious what you guys' thoughts are on that subject. Awesome. Thanks you all for all you put into the show. I really appreciate it.
All right.
That's a good question. That's deep though.
Yeah, what do you think?
It's a great question. First of all, I mean, before we get into the addressing the listener's question, which is a great question, Matt, I mean, seriously, I feel like you just took something precious from me. But okay, but I'm over it now. So
Sorry, Joel.
I think like my understanding of this is like, I think the typical way that we are trained to look at the world is through linear time, in which it's like, okay, this is the life we're living, and then we die, and then there's the afterlife. But I've said this before. I think we talked about, and I maybe mentioned this comment, which was kind of misunderstood when we had the first live Heretic Happy Hour podcast night, and I mentioned that I don't believe in the afterlife. But when I say I don't believe in the afterlife, I'm not saying that I believe that life ceases with the death of the human body. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying I don't think there's such a thing as a life and then afterlife, because it's so much our evangelical roots have just programmed us to see, okay, heaven starts or hell starts after you die. And I don't believe that's just reality. There's only one life, and it's the life we have in the present moment. And I think Jesus touched on this when he said, this is eternal life. And then he used a very present tense verb to say, knowing God, which is like present tense, and basically through incarnation, the one who he sent, which he was talking about himself. And also, we are also sent as well. So really knowing this reality in the present tense through incarnational reality, which is who we are. We are God incarnate in human flesh. That's in the same way that Jesus was sent. So are we sent the same way? So knowing reality, being aware of reality, it's continual. So some people exist in hell right now because they're suffering. Some people exist in the state of bliss and heaven. I just think that there's a different dimension. There's many different dimensions. And so what people typically refer to as heaven, I honestly understand that to be a different dimension, mm-hmm. But I don't think it's in the sense of like, a place where, heaven starts when you die, that kind of thing. I don't subscribe to that, but that's my understanding of it.
Keith, what do you think?
Well, no, I guess I do believe that as Zach described it in his voice message, the pearly gates and the streets of gold and all that. I don't believe that. I think those are totally metaphors. I don't think those are literal, but I do believe, I think, right. I subscribe to patristic universalism. And I do think that the idea that, in the end, after we die, there will be some process by which we will all come to be in the presence of God. I don't know exactly what that'll look like, but I do believe eventually every human being who's ever lived will experience that process, and we will all be together with God. in some way or shape or form. Again, I don't know how to describe that. I don't even think, again, the Bible is attempting to describe it in any literal form. I think it's just trying to give us a general sense that, as Paul said, to be absent from the body is to be at home with the Lord. But yeah, so I guess I would say yes, I do believe, but I'm not sure, exactly what it looks like.
Yeah, that's sort of where I'm at. And if there is some sort of, I don't know, first person subjective experience after death, what I know now is only this present moment. So I can't think it would be too much different than what we experience as heaven on earth, just void of suffering.
Right.
But I don't know exactly what that would look like. And you're right. All that pearly gate stuff is obvious metaphor, because it seems kind of like some of the depictions are kind of boring as compared to the vastness of the universe right now. So it's like, well, it certainly can't be a literal city or something.
Right.
Yeah, just sorry. And another thing that I might add is when Paul said to be absent from the bodies, to be present with the Lord, I don't think what he was saying is to be present in the bodies, to be absent from the Lord. I think that's a misnomer. It's many evangelicals will approach like, I get to die and be with God.
Right. I agree.
But we are with God right now.
Yeah, I agree.
It's just that. It's just that I think the truth behind what Paul is saying there is that, hey, to be absent from the body is not a ceasing of existence. It's actually to be present with God in the same way. And honestly, a lot of folks would just bristle at this because they're like, oh man, I don't feel like I'm with God right now. And I think that's the problem. That's the cause of the suffering in our life. It's because there are things in this dimension that block our view and our experience of being with God. But I think maybe other dimensions will have other experiences with that, just like we do here in this dimension. Even suffering, though, I'm not so convinced that suffering ends with this dimension. I think suffering can go on even after we pass in other dimensions. But that's another conversation. I just think that it's present. Hell, heaven, it's present as we speak.
Yeah.
But healing happens the same way when we come awake to truth of non-separation, that we are present with God, that we're loved. I think these are all the things that alleviate our suffering.
Yeah. I can dig that.
Oh, by the way, though, let me just introduce myself because I don't know what happened, but my name is Jamal.
Jamal.
I'm an author of Free to Love, published with Quoir, and I guess I have an announcement to make.
You just said the name of your book and you got the Heresy button.
Well, and I guess, okay, so this just something doesn't feel right. We are sponsored by this group called the Unfundamentalist. And the Unfundamentalist is a group focused on following Jesus' commands to love God and our neighbor, and is dedicated to opposing the toxic, power, mongering, fear, inflaming nonsense that is inherent in economic, political, societal, and religious fundamentalism. Find us online at facebook.com /unfundamentalist, or read our blog at unfundamentalists with an s.com.
That was so much better. I love that. That was beautiful.
I just don't feel like that fit me very well.
Yeah, that didn't work so good. This was an awkward introduction, huh?
It was a little different anyway. Yeah. Well, there you go. Well, hey, I've got an announcement too, everybody. In addition to the amazing hotline, we also have a Patreon page. And if you go to patreon.com/Heretic Happy Hour, you will find it. And oh my gosh, there's some amazing stuff there. So we, as of this recording, we're about $41 away from hitting our first tier goal, which is amazing because once we do hit that goal, we are going to announce to everybody some amazing, cool, awesome, unbelievable project that we cannot wait to announce to you. But so we're so close. Oh, so close. And thank you, by the way, to all of those who have supported us. And we have, for those who support us monthly, they get access to like bonus podcast episodes we record just for that Patreon group, bonus interview clips and segments, sometimes sneak peeks of interviews before we actually publish them in the actual blog, as well as, we're doing unique blog posts and just fun stuff, funny stuff, serious stuff, a lot of fun. So it's awesome things happening on the Patreon page. Go check it out. If you're not supporting us, yet, please do so and help us get to those goals. And we also want to say a big, huge thank you to those of you who have supported us on the Patreon page. I want to just shout out to Emily Kuhn, Daryl Holbrook, Michael Edwards Ronning, Mark Martinez, Brenna Laws, Sarah Jo Giese, Philip Martin, Lisa Stratton Stevens, Steve Atkinson, Karen Reddington. How you doing, Karen? Kelly Caldwell, and Jane Romano. Thank you, thank you, thank you so very much. It means a lot. And it's now time for us to transition to everyone's favorite part of the show, the Heretic of the Week.
It's the Heretic of the Week.
I'm David Hayward, and I'm a heretic.
Hi, David.
Hey, guys. How are you guys doing?
Great. How are you, David? It's nice to have you on here, man.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
This is Matt here. My first question for you is why do you think people, or in your experience, why do you think people consider you a heretic?
Yeah, man, you guys jumped right into it.
That's right.
Yeah. All right.
We're on a time crunch here. Come on now.
A heretic is somebody who's unorthodox. So I suppose, or I'm an unorthodox kind of guy. But here's the problem. Everybody has their own worldview. Everybody has their own beliefs. We like to believe that we believe in packs or tribes, but really, when you talk to each individual person, their beliefs are pretty unique to themselves. Everybody has their own quirks and tweaks and everything. So I think I am unorthodox to everybody else on the planet. So I'm everybody's heretic, really. And yeah, I mean, how many people? I don't know anybody who believes exactly like I do. So everybody else is my heretic, right? So I think basically we're all heretics and trying to find the way. But yeah, I think I'm a heretic to most people because I'm unorthodox. I think outside of their boxes, and just like I try to think outside of my own box. So
right,
yeah.
Our first episode, guys, where Heresy. It's entitled "Heresy is in the Eye of the Beholder," and that seems so damn true that it doesn't. If you ask one person, he's going to have a list of heretics. If you ask another, who might even be in his similar camp, I mean, no two people agree and think completely alike. So we're just all going to have different people we're labeling here and there, and it's all just seems to be kind of a mess, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, the word labels, that's true. Everybody has their own label because the contents are different. So, I've got, I don't know how many labels I've got people trying to stick on me. I resist labels and titles and things like that, but it's because people are trying to figure out what the heck my contents are, right?
Yeah, well, you're the naked pastor, right? That's the label.
I'm the naked pastor. Well, you know what? That is my label, but the label is excuse me. That the naked pastor is the reason I use that is because I wanted to be vulnerable and transparent and honest online. I wanted to be totally visible. I wanted people to see what a pastor, and I was a local pastor once. I wanted to see what pastors really struggle with, and to just be really honest about that. So that's what gets people in trouble is when they come out theologically, right? So that's where my trouble was coming out theologically. And I dare say, if anybody comes out theologically, you're going to be branded a heretic.
Yeah. So would you say that really the main reason people might brand you a heretic is that you're just a little too honest?
Well, honesty doesn't help because I'm telling people what I believe. Thank God I don't live in a place where people burn people for heresy. If I lived back then, I'm not sure how old I would have gotten. And that's the same with a lot of people I know, people who come out in whatever way, but coming out theologically, yeah, that's very risky. I know a lot of people who struggle with that. Just even coming out in their own families or in their own marriages or whatever, coming out theologically is a very risky business these days.
Yeah.
That's so true.
Yeah.
So, David, a big part of what you do is kind of creating these pretty, usually either very funny or very profound cartoons. At least that's kind of the main way I discovered you online. And by the way, you allowed me to use one of your best ones, I think, the Jesus Eraser in my book, Jesus Untangled. Thank you. That was awesome. And so I think those are the kind of maybe the format, right? You've chosen a format of cartooning. Can you explain real quick, like why did you choose that format, and do you feel like that medium does it help to soften the message, or does it help to communicate it better? What do you think?
No, it does not soften. No, I actually, cartooning found me. I'm an artist. I've been an artist for a long time, and I was blogging and showing my art and writing and everything like that. And I always liked cartoons, and I was particularly inspired by, I don't know if you guys have heard of Hugh MacLeod, Gaping Void. I liked his cartoons, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to try cartooning, see if it works. I'm going to challenge myself to do a cartoon every day. I gave myself maybe a couple of weeks or a month at the most, but here I am 11 years later, still cartooning and every day. And so for me, I decided I'm going to keep it to one frame cartoon. And holy shit, I want to hear that bell. There we go. The response I got was like unbelievable. Like I would take time and write these nice lengthy posts and put a lot of thought into it and everything. And I might get the odd comment or like or share, but man, I put a cartoon up there with one picture, and it just it was powerful. So a picture's worth 1,000 words, they say, and I think it's really true. So when I take an example of the cartoon, the eraser one that you mentioned, where people are drawing lines of division between us, and then Jesus is busy with an eraser trying to erase them. Like that says a whole lot in one little picture. Yeah. And it, for some people, they're like, yeah, that's awesome. And then other people are like, no, that's terrible. That means everybody's right and nobody's wrong, and all this kind of thing. And people have a problem with it. So I really liked how just doing one cartoon and putting it up there can stir up so much trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. So, hey, real quick here, since we are on a time crunch, can you explain a little bit of your deconstruction process? You mentioned you were a pastor at one point, and now you've kind of gone through this deconstruction process.
Right.
What caused that? What were some of the kind of the big,
Well, I'll be brief, but I had two deconstructions. One was theological, and that I spent years there. And then in 2009, I woke up from a dream where my theological deconstruction was over, and I had peace of mind, and that was in 2009, and it stuck with me ever since. And that peace of mind is beautiful. I love it. I have no more theological angst, no more mental anguish, And so my theological deconstruction ended then. I struggled theologically for decades trying to figure things out and make sense of everything theologically, and I couldn't. And then that one dream settled it. But I had another deconstruction, and that was from church and ministry, and that was difficult. I left the ministry in 2010, and it took me a good, I'd say a good 5 years to decompress, to recover from that addiction, and I'm now at peace. Everything's good. Everything's cool. But that was a rough go. So there were two deconstructions: theological and ecclesiological.
Hey, so are we allowed to ask you what that dream was about?
Well, it was just a waterfall. I just saw a waterfall, and I was at the bottom of it. But I'm talking about a huge waterfall, like Niagara Falls waterfall. And I was at the bottom, and I knew in the dream that that was the structure of reality, and it was kind of Trinitarian in structure, like a triad. So above the falls was the infinite source that we cannot see. and can only guess what it is. Then coming over the falls, that unbelievable amount of water is the incarnation or the revelation. And then where it hits the ground, it spreads out. I understood to be the application of that to all living things. So a Christian would see it as God, Jesus, Holy Spirit. A Jewish person on the other side of the fall might see it as Yahweh, Moses and the Torah, and then the Spirit in the synagogue, and so on and so forth. Then a Buddhist might see it another way. Atheist might see it another way. So what I woke up from that dream, I understood it's all perception. It's all comes down to perception. And the only thing that seems to divide us is our words, our language, our paradigms. Because I think really, essentially, fundamentally, we are one and we are united. But it's just the language that separates us. So that's it in a nutshell.
That makes sense. Yeah, and David, this is Jamal here.
Hi Jamal.
Yeah, I actually have a. This is something it's been on my mind for a while, and I was excited to hear that you're coming on the podcast here because I wanted to ask you about this. But a lot of your cartoons feature a woman, and her name's Sophia. And so I wanted to ask you about who is Sophia and why is she a woman, and how did this come about for you? Like, what's that process been like for you?
All right, so that she was a major. So we know Sophia is Greek for wisdom, and it was about a year or two after I left the church. I was drawing one day. Usually I do nice, pretty watercolor landscapes, so on. But this one day I drew this picture of a girl standing in front of a huge grizzly bear, and she's holding up her teddy bear to the grizzly bear, and I spent hours on it, and I didn't know why I was drawing it. I'd never drawn anything like that before in my life, and even my wife was like, "What's that? Like, why'd you draw that?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I don't know." Wow. It's just, it's just like a stream of consciousness almost. And anyway, every week I would draw another one. And finally I figured out, hey, I'm drawing my own deconstruction here. I'm drawing my own spiritual journey. And, I studied some Carl Jung as well, and he talks about the anima, which is the female aspect of the male, right? And I understood that I was drawing my own journey out of spiritual bondage and slavery and into my own freedom. So I drew 59 Sophia images and wrote a meditation for each one. And I called it The Liberation of Sophia. It's about a woman, but it's really my story. In fact, it's being translated into Spanish right now. I hope to have it. It's already translated. I'm getting it published. And one of the translators was like, "Are you sure you wrote this? It seems like a woman wrote it to me." I'm like, "No. Well, Sophia wrote it. My Sophia, my inner Sophia." So it's my favorite book. I've got 6 books out so far, but that's my favorite one by far and my bestseller.
Wow, that's amazing. That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah,
and I wanted to ask you also, like, I know a lot of your work involves helping other people deconstruct.
Yes.
So could you talk a little bit about that? Like what's your process like with that? And how you help people move from where you've been, or just the part, being in bondage to certain things to coming into an area where they're more comfortable exploring.
Right. So I help people deconstruct, and there's 3 ways I do that. Naked Pastor blog, and anybody can see that any day. And, like you said, I think it was Jamal, you know, how it's helped your journey, or Matt, you mentioned that as well. It's been helpful in your journey. And, but then I also help people a little more intensely. I have an online community called The Lasting Supper, and that's for the members there, people who are deconstructing and trying to reconstruct their lives. And then I do one-on-one coaching for people who need, and that's the best way if you want to get through deconstruction quicker and healthier. Doing it with somebody and processing it with somebody is really, really helpful. It helped me. So what I do is what you do is you give people space. I just provide people with a safe space where they can vent and question and doubt and process. And I totally believe that empowers people to heal themselves, and they will find their feet again. But they just need that place to do it, because most of the relationships we religious people find ourselves in can be very codependent and toxic, and they're not very free, where we feel free that we can come out theologically, because we fear rejection or embarrassment or shame or guilt or fear. So if you can provide a safe space for people to process it, they will find a way to heal themselves.
Oh, that's beautiful, David. I totally agree, and I also am involved in some coaching, and I completely understand. There's just no better way than when you're working with people individually, and helping them process their journey personally. It's beautiful. I'm so glad. Thank you for what you do. So,
well, if I can say, like, it was about a year after I left the ministry, I thought I was doing great, but actually, when my wife looked at me one day and she said, "David, you need help." and I realized I needed to process this, leaving the church and leaving, the ministry. I needed to process that with somebody. So I found a coach, and she really, really sped up the process, decreased the pain, not only in intensity, but in time. And it was absolutely crucial to my healing myself. So yeah, totally.
Oh, that's perfect. Well, I'd like to ask you, like, when you think of the future or where you're headed, what are you excited about moving forward? Where do you see some of your work heading into? What's on the horizon for you?
Well, if Trump doesn't kill us first, what I would like to do is continue helping people deconstruct. I'm also helping people with creativity. I'm a creative person. I create stuff every day. I cartoon, I write, I paint. I facilitate online community, and so on and so forth. And I'm helping people unleash their creativity. I'm coaching people in that way as well. And, continuing with the Lasting Supper, and I'm continuing to write. I want to write about the waterfall dream and the theological sort of story that goes with that. Yeah. I call it the Z theory. But I'm looking forward to getting that out there too. So I've got my plate full, but I'm really excited and passionate about it. And I really do appreciate all the fans out there, the people who are reading me and liking my cartoons and stuff. It really is an inspiration. So it just helps keep me going. I love helping people, and it's good to hear from people that are being helped. It's a great way to live.
It is.
Hey, remind before we jump off here, remind people where they can get a hold of you.
Nakedpastor.com.
All right.
That's where I'm at. All my connections are there. Everything's there. If you want to, and I always answer emails or texts or questions or anything. I'm always, I'm really good at responding. So, if you want to get in touch with me, I'm totally an open door, green light.
Beautiful.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks, David.
Beautiful.
Hey, thanks guys. Really nice to chat.
Wow. That was an amazing interview. David Hayward, super great guy. Love his stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And thank you for being patient, David. And it took us this long to get this in. When did we record this? Back in October or November? So it's been a while. Thank you so much for being patient with us. Yeah.
Yeah. And we really just appreciate guys like him, his work. I mean, he's faithful to just create art and to put it out there. And I think it's obviously comes from his experience and the things that he's deconstructed. But, if he wasn't doing that, like there's so many conversations that people have had that he's contributed to people's process of deconstructing and reconstructing their faith. But it's invaluable that guys like him exist and that they do what they do. And I'm just so thankful that I know it's not been easy, but I'm sure he's taken a lot of flack over the years, but he's been a blessing to so many people. So thank you, David.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Super great guy. Love what he does. And, I know him, and I know that he takes a lot of heat for some of his cartoons as well, because, he's kind of doing in cartoon form what we do with blogs and podcasts. And so he takes a lot of heat for some of the stuff that he does. But, so there's some ideas that translate so much more beautifully in art, in cartooning. It's amazing to me. He can do something with a couple of lines on a page that takes, it takes me all day to write a blog,
Right.
thousands of words to say the same thing. So it's pretty cool. And speaking of that, we are doing our podcast topic. It's a great little transition here about art. And so we want to talk about the power of art. I think one of our bonus podcast episodes that we did for the Patreon page, we touched on this a little bit. And we were like, yeah, this would be a great topic to do for the whole podcast, and perfect to kind of follow David Hayward as our Heretic of the Week to talk about this whole idea of art. So, what is art? We want to talk about like human creativity. Where does it come from? And, what makes something Christian art, quote unquote, or just art in general? Is there a Christian art, or is art just art? And that kind of stuff. So I have a lot of different things here we could move into. I guess the one thing I would want to say just to kick us off is that obviously God is the creator, so God is creative. We know that Jesus was a storyteller, which I love, by the way, as a writer. I love that when Jesus shows up, the incarnation of God in the human form, he's telling stories as a way of communicating truth and getting people to think, which I love that. And so obviously then that means if we are created in the image of God, who is the creator, we are also creative. If we are following Christ, and then again, we also are partaking in this nature of Christ, which is also creative. And so I've always felt like that there's always been a spiritual element to any kind of creativity, whether you're a Christian or not. And so for me, and I'm just going to say this, and then we can, I want to hear what you guys think about this. But for me, like I started noticing when I was younger, like I would listen to something on the radio, or even sometimes read a book or look at a work of art or something like that, and just feel like so touched and so inspired, and really feel like, man, God is in this. God is speaking to me through this, whatever it is, a song or a movie or a book or a work of art or something like that. And then say, well, but that's weird because the artist who created it isn't a professing Christian. So how could it be that I could have picked up on that? How could they have even transmitted something like that? So for me, and again, this is just kind of how I think, I feel like anytime an artist or any human being taps into sort of this creative spirit, we're actually connecting with God, whether we know it or not, right? We are connecting with God because He's the source of creativity, and because of that, because we're trying to create something that's beautiful, or something that's true, or something that's profound, or something that we want to move other people in a emotional or spiritual way. It's like we sort of receive, I would say, we receive from God sort of this creative spark that also then has a bit of this truth in it that kind of transcends what we could possibly have ever intended with our own minds. In other words, so like for me, a lot of times I'll read a poem that I wrote, for example, or listen to a song that I wrote years later, and I'll just go, man, where did that come from? Or did I create that? Or, you know what I mean? It's almost like I'm taking a step back from the art, and I'm marveling just as much as anybody else might to say, where did that come from? Like, how did this thing come into being? And again, for me, I just think of it as we're connecting as human beings with the divine, and God is sort of creating through us in some senses, or at least that's potentially what could happen. And that to me is true art that has weight and resonance and meaning. So anyway, that's just my opening thoughts there on that. What do you guys think about this stuff?
Well, I think you said a lot of good things, Keith, and I agree with so many of them. I think the problem, you mentioned Christian art, and I put that in quotes, I guess.
Oh yeah.
Because it seems that sometimes art transcends individual languages and even Christianese. So I think you're right. Good art points to truth and gets to the heart of things in ways that other content creation may not. I mean, it's all art, but because of the diversity of art, we can speak these things to each other, even if we don't speak the same language. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Or we don't have the same faith tradition, so we don't know the language we're really speaking. And that's where I think Christian art, quote unquote, misses the point. Is that so many times it's like you're forcing something to be spoken rather than just letting the art be. So we will, at least in my tradition, we'll sing worship songs that are all pretty much the same. They skip the pain and the suffering and the real human stuff that we go through, and they just jump right to this like kind of surfacey, wishy-washy Jesus is my boyfriend stuff or things like that. Whereas I think true art is gritty and it's dirty, and it really calls attention to maybe injustices in the world, and it can be powerful in doing that. And I think that when we try to force it to say something, then we've missed the point of art, and all we've created is kitsch.
Yep. I think that's why people love the Psalms so much, like so many people love the Psalms because David and the other psalmists, because they're not all David, but he's just brutally honest and questioning, like, God, where are you? Here I am suffering and you don't you care? And those sort of very real and human and raw and painful questions are just human. And so we resonate with that. And like you said, if things are too, nice and clean and perfect, it comes across kitschy or it comes across fake, because we all know that's not real life.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. We know not everything is like Jesus washed down on me and waves of, it's not all, yes, some of those things are true, but it's like, damn it, I want something a little bit more real when I'm hurting or when I'm in pain. I don't want to sing about this hope, this metaphysical Jesus and how much he might personally mean to me. Like sometimes Jesus needs to just be quiet and sit next to you and suffer. And that's kind of what our art needs to do as well. Like it needs to really impact us in a real way, not just because we slapped Jesus on a cloud on a cross and it looks nice in our, well, it doesn't look nice, it looks kitschy in our living room or whatever. That's just, it's not all about that all the time,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the idea of Christian art is kind of, it's just not real, because there is no such thing as Christian art. I was talking to a friend one time, and he was saying, there's no more such thing as Christian music or Christian movies or Christian art any more than there's like go to the grocery store and you buy Christian macaroni and cheese. It's like it's a label that we put on things. Christianity is a belief system, just like any other religion. It's a belief system, but truth and reality transcends the belief system. So, like for example, like if you're, if a baby's born, the baby may feel loved, but that baby doesn't have any beliefs. You may love the baby, but it's not according to a belief. It's just a reality. It's something that just is. And people can recognize what is beyond a belief system. You can feel it, you can experience it. And this is true of all human beings. And this is why art, so oftentimes, that's why it's perplexing to Christians are perplexed that God is so clearly manifested in songs and music, that's quote unquote in the secular category. And Christians, if they're being honest, lots of Christians are just like, I'm blown away because that's so clearly the voice of God, the heart of God. And the artist is like not a Christian. But again, Christianity isn't actually real. It's actually not real. It's a belief system that somebody invented. There is no such thing as this thing. There is no independent Christianity that just exists in the world somewhere. It's literally an illusion. It's a belief system. It's a belief system. It's just a belief system that people kind of like come up with it as in a category in the mind somewhere, but it's not actually reality. But reality is just reality. So when you tap, like for example, as a human beings can't help but be expressors of reality in a creative way, because obviously when human beings are creative, because God is a creator, and if we are truly the children of God, which let's see, which human being on the planet is not an offspring of the divine? So if dogs bark, because dogs, like if you have two dogs and they have children, their puppies are they're going to be dogs. They're going to bark. They're going to do things that dogs do because that's what they are. Well, if God has expressions of God's self that come from the divine being, which is what humans are, then human beings are going to do the things that God does, because that's our nature. We are God nature. We have God's nature. Everybody has God's nature. That's who we are. We can't help it. It's just who we are. So we create in the same way that the infinite source creates, because that's literally our very essence and our very nature. That's why we create, and everybody creates. Everybody does it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm first of all, I'm alarmed and shocked that you are eating secular mac and cheese. I can't believe you would do such a thing. But no, it's so true, man. It's like the whole thing about, do you get your Christian milk from a Christian cow? And, get those, you got to freshen your breath with testaments, Christian mints, because you don't want to be freshening your breath with secular evil Satan mints. No, but I mean, it's true. But see, I'm glad you said that, because see, that whole way of thinking, Christians have bought into this, and it's just a Christian subculture, right? So we do think that we can only listen to Christian music and watch Christian movies and wear Christian T-shirts and bowl at the Christian bowling alley and call the Christian plumber to fix our Christian pipes and eat Christian hot dogs. It's silly. Like, once you start thinking of it that way, it's nonsense. However, what isn't nonsense, what I think is actually very, very, it is real and it is very serious, and I would say even at least dangerous or damaging, is this idea of the Christian subculture, because Christians have created a version of the world that is a sweet little bubble where we only interact with other Christians. We avoid, Muslims and atheists and Buddhists and Hindus. Right. It's like those scary, scary people, because we're afraid that what they have might rub off on us, and we have to be careful, and we don't listen to music that isn't, sanctified or holy. And again, it creates this false reality. And what it really does, that I think is the most dangerous, is it separates Christians from other people. It creates an us-them, which is dangerous and which is damaging. And it's not real. It's not reality. There's only one world. It's the world we all live in. It's this world.
Yeah.
And there is no Christian world and secular world. There's just the world.
Yeah.
And your neighbors are your neighbors. People are people. Music is music. Art is art. And we have to break out of that thing,
Yeah, and writings are writings, books
Yes.
are books. So again, anytime we try to say, okay, these are the inspired books and these are not, going back to the canon, the Bible, all this stuff, this is where you draw. This is the same thing. It's the same thing, saying, okay, this has inspiration, this doesn't. Really, in all reality, when going back to even Richard Rohr's interview that we did on the podcast last week, something that he said was like, and obviously affirming, this was even traditional Christian understanding going back, to the early days of the movement. But the understanding is that the incarnation itself, like when the Big Bang happened, was the incarnation. It's literally, you're talking about the inbreaking of the inspired word of God took on materiality at the Big Bang. So we're talking about God made manifest in the physical realm, and this was not specifically limited to certain things. I mean, it's literally, we're talking about everything that exists is in some way, shape, or form an expression from the mind of God. So like, it's all inspired and that kind of thing. So I love how Richard said it. He said the first Bible came into being at the Big Bang. When we say Bible, we're talking about the inspired text that we're drawing that we can look at and go, there, that's inspired. So again, we're still dealing with this idea of like, certain things are inspired, certain things aren't. If you have eyes to see what is real, you will see that thread run through just about everything.
Right. And yeah, that's exactly it. If you experience creativity and art, you don't necessarily need to have the right language to explain it. I mean, if you walk through the forest and you see the interaction of a bee and a flower, or the interaction of a squirrel picking up a nut that fell on the ground, and you see the creativity of the mind of the divine. Wow, this is a really amazingly creative world we live in, and it's beautiful. And then you put those things, maybe you put your headphones in and you listen to Chopin as you walk, or you listen to Mozart, and you just see that the beauty and the truth that art speaks to, it goes hand in hand with the created order, which comes from the mind of God. And we necessarily, the call to say, oh, it only needs to be one sort of art, Christian art or Catholic art or Protestant art or Muslim art, to be the right interpretation of the truth. I think we've missed the point at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, that's that whole thing that I have a problem with when it comes to, and I think I have a problem with this whole Christian subculture thing, because I used to work in it. You know what I mean? I used to work for a Christian record company.
Right.
I saw how it as a business. I mean, if you think about it, it's become the cart that pulls the horse, because in the beginning of, like, say, the Jesus movement, when this was a spontaneous, beautiful thing that was happening among the young people, they were all just falling in love with Jesus and falling in love with each other, and there was a lot of spontaneity and beauty there. Some of them started writing songs, again, just spontaneously, not because they wanted a record deal. They just had a guitar and they loved Jesus, and songs were coming and flowing, and they were singing songs together. And then then it kind of grows and grows until somebody says, "Man, we should record that song, man. That's awesome." So a guy goes, "I got a studio. Okay, yeah, come on over and we'll get some money and we'll record some stuff and make a record." And so again, it starts off as a way, like, the recording process is serving the music and the movement, but then very quickly you create a market for this music, and then the market dictates what kind of music the artist needs to produce if they want to sell 10,000 units or 20,000 or 50,000 units, because that's what's successful and that's going to make the marketing, and all that, blah, blah, blah. So now you've got a market that the art has to serve. And that is really, to me, where things start getting corrupted. And this is true whether it's Christian music or secular music or music in general, a lot of things where a market creates the kind of stuff that it thinks people want, the majority of people want. And then now artists aren't creating art out of this place of spontaneity and out of this place of genuine, connection with the divine and expressing beauty and truth. It's more like sitting down and saying, "Okay, my record company wants me to record an album that sounds like Pearl Jam, so that's what I'm going to do." Right? It's totally fake and dead and processed, and what you're creating might be music, but it may not be art.
Right.
And I think that's one of the unfortunate byproducts.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think, Keith, it was you who shared this quote from Steve Turner, is that he quotes, "One role of the artist is to provoke and even disturb us so that we can see in new ways. As the ancient prophets did, art frequently condemns the values and concerns of its surrounding culture, often in a loud, harsh voice. In consequence, the artist is often outcast, rejected, or unpopular." And and that's a great quote, because it shows that, yeah, a lot of these so-called artists aren't really creating art. They're just being the next sound that the market can push onto people, but they're not critiquing the culture. They're not getting us to see in any new ways. They're just regurgitating the same, I guess, mimetic structure where, we do have true art, but I'm just saying, as a market, Christianity has just become a market of pushing. And you go on. I was on this long drive to LA down to see you guys, and I was flicking through the radio station, and every Christian song on every station sounded the same, had the same melodic structure. This is like the same timing. It was the same song structure. You had the verse, chorus, bridge, and then you end on the chorus. And I was like you. I was in music for a long time, playing worship for like 10 years, playing drums, and it was like every song we would just build and build and build and go, and then quiet and go, build again. And that is not art. It wasn't really challenging like the prophets did, the current status quo. It wasn't like Bob Dylan or someone like that who's pushing the envelope and getting us to think outside of our theological box or political box or whatever worldview box, whatever box it was. That's the artist is trying to push those walls out. And when you get a market that does things differently, they don't create art. They just do the status quo. They're just wanting you to stay in that box so they can make more money.
Yeah, and see, that's so true. And what I love about that quote is that it's saying something which I think a lot of art in general has lost today, because there are markets, right? People want to look. You want to pay the bills. You want to feed your family, and do your art. And I get that there's a tension there. But I think real art, especially the way Steve describes it in that quote, I believe this anyway. I think art should challenge the status quo. It should confront the culture and the humanity. It should make us uncomfortable, and that means then the artist has to risk being very unpopular and being even, like we experience a lot of times with our writing and with our podcast, the ideas we're throwing out that are not status quo, that some people embrace it and go, "Oh, yes, I'm so glad, I love it." But a lot of people push back against it and say, "Oh no, that's horrible. That's evil. You shouldn't do that." But for me, I I much more appreciate an artist who's real. And if you think about it, you mentioned Bob Dylan. Like, I just watched a documentary about Bob Dylan, and it was fascinating because, he started off, he kind of got started in the folk music realm, which was all protest music, right? It was like very political, very anti-war, social justice, caring for the poor. And he wrote some great, great songs, like Blowing in the Wind, amazing song, right? It is a powerful song.
Right.
But then what happened was immediately this folk movement, sort of wrapped its arms around Bob Dylan and said, Bob, okay, you're one of us now. So you have to keep writing songs like this, and you have to keep producing this kind of art. And Bob Dylan just said, and this is just who he is. His whole thing was, bullshit. I'm not doing that. I'm going to be who I am. You want me to conform? Thank you. You want me to conform? I'm not going to be your monkey. You know what I mean? I'm not going to just do what you tell me to do or dance the way you tell me to dance. So he on purpose went the other way, right? He started doing pulling electric music, electric guitars and stuff into his music sets, and they freaked out. You know what I mean? They ostracized him. How dare you? But his whole thing was refusing to conform to the box. I'm not going to follow the status quo. In fact, everything I do is going to push against the status quo. And in the process of doing that, he had an incredible career of writing incredible songs, still wrote great songs, but he just refused to write songs that fit in a particular box, fit with a particular label that was nice and neat and packageable, right? And I love that. I mean, say what you will about love him or hate him, at least Bob Dylan had that kind of mentality. And for me, that is the true mentality of a real artist who just says, I'm not trying to serve a market. I'm trying to tell the truth. I'm trying to be honest. And I'm going to refuse to fit in any label or box that you want to stick me in.
Yeah, exactly. That's the beauty of it. And that's where it's at right there. And like the prophet who is never welcome in his hometown, neither is the artist often.
Yeah, and I think in order to truly be an artist, you have to just you really have to go to that place internally, inside, and be in touch with that place, because really people who, when you look at all great art isn't following an external pattern, even if it does, but that's not the source of it. It's coming from it's actually, I've heard an artist, I actually just did an interview on my own personal podcast with the songwriter who, she's written for all kinds of people, that you would hear, know of and heard of. But she said, basically, when she touched on this, is that, true art, or true songs, true creativity, whatever, it's not actually like the person who's doing the creating, even though it looks like they're creating it, in a sense, it's already there. So what you're doing is you're reaching into this immaterial realm, in this place where things aren't quite, like it's just the invisible realm, the realm that we would call God or consciousness or whatever. But like when you reach into that place and you're aware of that place, then you reach in and you take things from that place. And I believe God is always speaking. God is always has a heart and a mind, and a set of an ethos, which is love. Obviously, the essence is love, and so this love is always speaking, always communicating, always has a sentiment to be expressed. And so when we reach into that realm and tap into that realm, then we become very aware of that, and then that's what you create and bring it into this realm. We have obviously we partner in the sense that we are creating the vehicle, and there's a craft to it. But you're taking from that realm and bringing it into this realm because it already exists. So nothing is original in the sense of that's why you can look at creation and go, well, it's all an expression of the same source that it comes from. Like that's the essence of it. Like that's what it is. So people that, that get caught up in like, well, this isn't going to be popular or people aren't going to like it. I mean, nobody would say things that are unpopular unless they were connected to the source, typically, because that's why you have revelation and why you have creativity, because it's really just coming from that place and you're just expressing it in any intention you may feel is when, obviously people will say, oh, that's heretical or that's evil. They'll use words to label you as some, universalist or whatever it is that they call you. And that sounds like this, that sounds like that. But at the end of the day, it's like, you don't care about that because you know what you experience and you know what it's real because you've tapped into that and you just create from that. And that's what the best artists do. And if you know, again, if you're connected to fear, then that immediately shuts that flow off. So artists that worry about money, or how am I going to pay the bills, or you know, what are people going to say, or is this approved, or is this heresy? All of that shuts it completely down. And that's because that's fear. It literally is like it's like disconnecting a computer from the internet. It's like you don't have access even though you are connected still, you're not aware of the connection that you have to the source whenever those things creep in.
Yeah. And I love what you just said, because like, that's kind of what I was saying at the beginning. I really do believe that. And I know a lot of even writers and artists and musicians who totally believe that when they create, they are connecting to some, they all may have a different name for it. They may not call it God, but they do believe they're connecting to some creative force that is sort of the source of where this comes from. And I think, again, I think it is God. I think He is the creative one. And when we create, we have to do that. We have to create something. Well, no, I should say we don't have to. I think I could write a song right now that would be, okay, nice little jingle, and I could write some smart lyrics, whatever, cool. Oh, that's clever. But it wouldn't necessarily be, a song that was something that came from like taking the time to really connect with this creative force. So I think you have to intentionally go there and seek that out and make a habit of doing that.
You do. There was this, if I could jump in with this story, there was this songwriter I was interviewing, and she was talking about having a songwriting session with a couple other songwriters, and they were just getting nothing, and kind of struggling and really, just kind of hitting a wall, that kind of thing. And but then she had a dream, at night or whatever, and she had a dream, and in her dream, she vaguely remembered it. She was like in this kind of this stupor, but she just got up out of bed and said, I got to remember this. And so she hit record in her phone and just started playing, this melody. And it was, the dream was about her dad who had passed away and a few months back or whatever. And her dad in the dream was like giving her the song, was coming from him. She knew it in the dream. So she's played it in the piano and then started mumbling some lyrics or whatever. And then after she was done, she just stopped recording and went back to bed. She totally forgot about it. It was like literally coming out of a real deep sleep. She didn't remember it. She gets in this writing session again, with these other people. And then suddenly she's like, wait a minute, there's something on my phone here. And she plays it. And it's just, and then she plays the melody, and then it stirred something in all of them. And they just lyrics just started flowing, and arrangement and different stuff. And they put it together and it became a huge hit. So obviously a couple of well-known artists heard it, and they wanted to do it anyway. They ended up doing that song, and the song became a huge hit because it touched literally tens of thousands of people, maybe more. But it's like people didn't know the backstory in that. And I think there's songs out there all the time that become hits like that. But there's coming from a source. So when I was talking to her, when I was interviewing her, she said, "Yeah, I firmly believe my dad, who had passed away, gave me that song for my own healing because it really spoke to some deep things in her." It's like, I believe it was my dad. I don't think a relationship ends with death. I think we're still connected, just in a different way. So my dad, just like if he was alive, sometimes we share songs with one another. It's like my dad, shared the song with me, even though he had passed on. And this is the song that we wrote. And this is the song that got into the hands of these artists, and that became a huge hit.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. So can you guys think of examples of what we would say would be like true art? I don't want to say Christian art, because I think we've established there really isn't a Christian art versus any other kind of art. Art is art. So are there things that you guys would point to where you would say, man, that is art? Like that's either a song or, a movie or a book or something, a poem or something you think, man, that's profound, right?
I'd say I'll start with one of my favorite artists is he goes under the moniker Sleeping at Last. It's a guy named Ryan O'Neal, and everything he does just stirs something inside of me emotionally, and sometimes even brings tears to my eyes. Like, it's just such beautiful music. And so when I think of true art, and a lot of his videos are they're put to these beautiful images of nature and things like that, and it just it's very profound and very very striking when you listen to it in the right mood.
Yeah, for me, is a film director by the name of Terrence Malick, and Terrence, in my opinion, like with the movies he makes, like when I see them, it just stirs something so deep in me. I love it. I just feel like it's does some things in such a brilliant way. But like he, there's a number of movies that he did that I'm like, this is the most amazing way to communicate what I consider to be reality or truth or so inspired. It's like, my goodness, like this is. It's like it's scripture to me. It's like you're literally watching this film, and it's like this is the inspired word of God on screen, and because it's just speaking to deep reality. So for me, Terrence Malick films. I haven't seen all his movies, but a lot of his movies I've seen. Oh my goodness, it just blew me away. Blows me away.
You and I agree, man. You and I could do a whole podcast just on Terrence Malick. I love Tree of Life is just amazing. I love his stuff. I would think, I was trying to think, so one of you did a song, one of you did a movie. I was trying to think, okay, let me do a book or something. I think an author that, and again, I've not read all of his stuff, but the stuff I've read 2 of his books. So Cormac McCarthy he's a living novelist. He's an incredible fiction writer, but he wrote 2 of his books became movies. So he wrote the book that was called The Road, and it was a post-apocalyptic film about a dad and his son kind of walking and in this post-apocalyptic landscape. The way that book is written, it's poetry. Seriously, I would stop reading, a certain paragraph or something in a chapter, and I'd go to Wendy and say, listen to this, and just read her, just lines from this chapter, and it felt like poetry. It was just beautiful. It's like I've never encountered anybody who could write a fiction story where every single word of that fiction story was beautifully crafted and placed, like poems, like a poem. It was just so beautiful. And he also wrote another great book called No Country for Old Men, which is again based on, there was a film based on that book, but the book is beautiful. I mean, if you've seen the movie, I know it's a little dark and gritty and violent, but I'm telling you, when I read the book, I wept. I mean, it was so powerful and beautiful. So yeah, I love Cormac McCarthy. He's incredible.
Speaking of poetry, I think poetry, it's an interesting thing because it's words, so it's different than a book, it's different than story. It's different. In some ways, it is like a song, songwriting and poetry can be similar. But poetry is like just this crafted, very purposeful expressions of words that just they just do something to your being, it speaks volumes. Like you can get things across in a poem that you can't get across in an explanation, but they're both using words, and one of the things I love, there's a lot of things in the Bible I don't like, but there's some things I do like. And one of the things I like in the scripture in the Bible is Ephesians 2:10, when it says that we were created, for we are his, like, or it says also that we are God's workmanship, and that word, the original word there that Paul uses for workmanship is the word poema, which is,
oh yeah, I love that,
where we get the word poetry. But like literally thinking about like the artist who creates, and thinking of God, the divine, the source, as this ultimate artist, and like we're literally like poetry. We're like poetry, where these masterpieces or craftsmanship that come from this divine, like that's who we are in itself. And it's just amazing to think that. And then we're reproductive in nature. So we not only are these poems, but then we create also other poems, and we just continue to spread these works of art, because that's the essence of who we are as human beings. We are these poems basically that God has written or God has spoken. You think about a word. What is a word? A word is a representation of an essence, an immaterial essence. That's what a word is. I love it that Jesus is called the Word of God. Obviously the material, or the physical essence of the immaterial, but we are also those words, those poems, that, made up of these expressions of the immaterial, the invisible. It's just beautiful, and that we get to create because that's exactly who we are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I love the understanding of God as a storyteller, because it if we go back to talking about art as something that speaks to suffering and speaks to pain, it makes sense that those things would exist in the world. If the story was going to be a good story, if it was going to be a human story, it's certainly going to have to speak to those things. And I don't want to go on the tangent of talking about the problem of evil, but things like thinking of this whole thing as a story helps alleviate my heart in that way, because the truth of a good story is that sometimes there's some really rocky shit we got to deal with. And Lord of the Rings, which is one of my favorite stories of all time, would be really, really boring without all the stuff. It would just be like, I love this. I love the way Tolkien describes the Shire, and I love the first couple chapters of Fellowship. But eventually, you got to get on with it. You got to go through this grueling story. And I like thinking of that like that, because it seems true, because we are storytellers, we are poets, we are painters, and we are musicians, and those folks speak to the realness of what it means to be a human.
Yeah, absolutely. I also want to say I love what you were going to, Jamal, with this idea of us being God's workmanship, or his poem, or his masterpiece, right? It also reminds me of, there's a verse in 2 Corinthians 3:3 where Paul says, he says that you are a letter from the Messiah, placed in our care, written not with ink, but by the Spirit of the living God, not on stone tablets, but on the human heart. And I love that, because I think that, again, it brings us into that. We are part of that, right? So we are the letter that Christ is writing, each one of us. And so then, if that's true, if we really believe that, then our lives we should be okay to let our lives be all of it. The good, the bad, the ugly, the struggle as well, the ups and the downs, the good and the bad. Because like you said, Matt, every story, how boring would the story be if there was never any trial or difficulty, right? You have to have something to overcome. You have to have, that's how you get a good ending, as to when you are struggling against the evil, or struggling against the, whatever the opposition. And so our lives are the same way. And if we can think of it in that term, like, my life is a letter that Christ is writing on my heart and on the hearts of other people too. Well, then, wow, this isn't even just about me. This is about me and everyone around me, that I get a chance to really, my life can be art, right? My life can be this work of art, that God can create something beautiful and amazing that will not just do something beautiful for me, but do something beautiful for everyone around me. And whether that's poems, songs, music, art, or just being a friend, right? Being there for somebody, standing with somebody, that's important. That's powerful.
Yeah, and I think it's a perception too. So, like, for example, I was talking to a friend the other day, and we were like, "Well, this is spiritual." We're talking about like what is a miracle, and what is not a miracle. And I was saying, it's all perception. Like everything can be spiritual if you see it as that. Like, for example, there's nothing less spiritual or less miraculous about the fact that you breathe every day, or that you woke up today. Right. Or that you have life. I mean, my goodness, like the fact that you exist, you have consciousness, you have life. Some people look at that and go, that's not a miracle. Well, that is a miracle if you see it that way. It all can be that way. Yeah. And I think art is like that. You could look at the meal that you're cooking as an art, as an expression of art, or you could look at it as like just some ridiculous meal I have to make. I got to cook, so I got to eat. Or you could look at it as art. It's all perception. Everything's perception. Everything you do can be art if you see it that way, as expressing,
of course,
being this expression of your life. And where does your life come from? If you just do the dominoes, trace it back, your life, everything you do comes from your consciousness, and your consciousness comes from where? God. And so it's all can be traced back to the source. So it's just a matter of perception.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm glad you mentioned food, because it's just, if we're mindful, it's like, why wouldn't we create art with our food? I mean, it's such an important thing in our lives. We all need food. Art is everywhere, and it's everywhere to behold. And if we're mindful about it, we can see it in everything.
Sure. And I think if people saw food as art, they wouldn't eat Spam.
or they would they would turn it into some beautiful food. They would do something with it.
So true.
Yeah. But that's still a good
Yeah.
point, though. I mean, I think in the end, art is about perception, right, Jamal? Like you said, like anything can be art. So it's not just, I'm an artist and I created a thing and there's my thing and that makes it art. Well, not necessarily, because someone could look at it and say, "What's that? That's not art. That's no big deal," right? So you need the viewer, the person who comes to the art. It's much more about the relationship between the person who is experiencing whatever that work is. That's where the art happens. That's where something really becomes art or not. It either resonates with somebody on a really deep, beautiful spiritual level, or it doesn't. And so that's why it's in some ways it's subjective, because what I would call art, somebody else would say that's not art. But even though they may not call art what I call art, they call something art. There's something else, though, that they do resonate with, that they say, no, this is art. And so I think perception is a big, big part of it. So we can, if we think about it, yes, maybe we can open ourselves up more to accept other things as being art and as being something that could be something that communicates truth or beauty. It could even be something that is from a divine spark, right, through another person, that we might normally not think of it as being art, but maybe it is, and we're just missing it. So sometimes it's just having the right eyes to see.
Love it. I love it. Hey, speaking of art, tell us your thoughts about what you think art is on the Heresy Hotline, 240 Free Heresy.
That's right.
Yeah, dang it. Guys, we have a hotline. Please call the hotline.
Yeah, we know. I told him. Thank you.
He told us.
And don't forget, we're sponsored by the Unfundamentalists.
That's right.
Yeah, right. And we have a hotline.